Have you ever looked at a map and wondered if every place that once existed is still there? What if I told you that scattered across America, there are addresses that have been completely erased from existence, zip codes that no longer appear on any official map, and entire communities that have been deliberately deleted from our postal system? These aren't ancient ghost towns from the Wild West. These are modern locations that existed within our lifetime, places where people lived, worked, and received mail, until one day they simply vanished from every GPS, every database, and every map you could find. Let's start with one of the most disturbing examples. In the hills of West Virginia, there's a zip code that was quietly removed from the United States Postal Service database in the early 2000s. The town of Thurmond, once a thriving railroad community, was assigned the zip code 25936. At its peak, Thurmond was a bustling hub where coal trains rolled through day and night, where 5 banks operated on a single street, and where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. But here's where things get strange. As the coal industry declined and people moved away, something unusual happened. The Postal Service didn't just stop delivering mail there. They actually removed the zip code from their official records. If you tried to send a letter to 25,936 today, the system would tell you that zip code doesn't exist. It's not listed as inactive or discontinued. It's simply gone, as if it never was. Now, you might think this is just bureaucratic housekeeping, right? When a place becomes too small or unpopulated, they consolidate services. That makes sense. But the reality is far more complex and, frankly, more unsettling than simple administrative efficiency. What many don't know is that zip codes aren't just about mail delivery. They're woven into the fabric of our entire data infrastructure. Your zip code determines your insurance rates, your political district, your school assignments, your property values, and even your access to emergency services. When a zip code is deleted, it creates a strange liminal space where people and places exist in reality but not in the digital systems that govern modern life. Take the case of zip code 42223 in Kentucky. This code served a small community near Fort Campbell, a major military installation. In 2008, residents started noticing something odd. Their zip code would work sometimes and fail other times. Online retailers couldn't process their orders. Banks flagged their addresses as fraudulent. Emergency services had trouble locating their homes. The reason? The zip code had been marked for deletion in some databases but not others. It existed in a quantum state, simultaneously real and unreal depending on which system you consulted. For the people living there, it was a nightmare. Imagine trying to explain to a credit card company that yes, you do have a real address, even though their computer says you're trying to commit fraud. The residents of that community had to carry documentation proving their address was legitimate. They kept old utility bills, tax records, anything that showed their zip code had once been officially recognized. Some even resorted to using post office boxes in neighboring towns just to have an address that computers would accept. It was like living in bureaucratic limbo, where your home was real enough to pay taxes on but not real enough for Amazon to ship to. But here's the truly fascinating part. Some zip codes are deleted deliberately to hide things. In Nevada, there's a zip code that officially serves a population of 0. It doesn't appear on consumer maps, and the Postal Service will tell you it's for government use only. That zip code is 89023, and it's assigned to the Mercury test site within the Nevada National Security Site, formerly known as the Nevada Test Site where nuclear weapons were tested. This zip code exists, but you won't find it on Google Maps or MapQuest. Mail can be sent there, but only by people who already know the code exists. It's been functionally deleted from public view, hidden in plain sight. And it's not alone. There are dozens of these ghost zip codes across America, serving military bases, government facilities, and locations that someone decided the public didn't need to know about. The phenomenon gets even stranger when we look at urban areas. In parts of New York City, there are zip codes that were created in the 1960s and 70s to serve specific large buildings or companies. The World Trade Center had its own zip code 10048. After September 11, that zip code entered a strange purgatory. It couldn't be deleted because doing so felt disrespectful to what had happened there. But it couldn't function normally because the buildings it served no longer existed. For years, 10,048 existed as a memorial in database form, a digital ghost haunting the Postal Service's records. Mail addressed to it would be rerouted, but the code itself remained, a 5-digit tombstone in the system. Eventually, when new buildings rose at ground zero, the zip code was quietly reactivated, brought back from the dead to serve the living once more. Then there are the accidental deletions, the zip codes that disappeared due to human error or system glitches and created chaos in their wake. In 2015, a database update at the Postal Service temporarily erased several dozen zip codes across Montana and Wyoming. For 48 hours, those places simply didn't exist in the digital realm. People couldn't pay bills online. E-commerce sites refused to ship to their addresses. And most critically, emergency dispatch systems couldn't properly route calls because the addresses weren't recognized. When someone called 911 from one of these ghost zip codes, the system had no idea where to send help. Fortunately, the error was caught and fixed relatively quickly, but it exposed just how fragile our geographic infrastructure really is. What makes this all particularly eerie is that unlike ghost towns of the past, which you could still visit and see the abandoned buildings and empty streets, these modern ghost locations exist in a different kind of void. The physical place might still be there. People might still live there. But in the digital world that increasingly defines our reality, they've been erased. Consider the philosophical implications for a moment. If your address doesn't exist in the databases that matter, do you truly have an address at all? If you can't receive mail, can't order products online, can't verify your residence to open a bank account, are you really living there in any meaningful sense? This isn't just theoretical. There are people in America right now living in this strange twilight zone. In parts of Appalachia, in remote stretches of Alaska, and in declining industrial towns across the Rust Belt, there are communities whose zip codes have been absorbed into neighboring areas or simply discontinued. The Postal Service says they're served by adjacent zip codes now, but try explaining that to an algorithm. These people exist in what researchers have started calling address poverty. They have homes, but they don't have addresses that the modern world recognizes. And as more of our lives move online, as more services require address verification, these ghost zip code residents find themselves increasingly locked out of normal society. The problem is getting worse, not better. As rural America continues to depopulate, the Postal Service faces mounting pressure to cut costs. That means consolidating routes, closing post offices, and yes, eliminating zip codes that serve too few people to be economically viable. Each year, a handful of zip codes are quietly discontinued, their residents reassigned to different codes, their small slice of geographic identity erased from the official record. But here's what really keeps cartographers and postal historians up at night. There's no comprehensive public list of deleted zip codes. The Postal Service doesn't publish a memorial registry of discontinued codes. They simply vanish from the current database, and unless someone was paying attention at the time, there's no easy way to know they ever existed. This means that somewhere in America, there are probably dozens, maybe hundreds of zip codes that have been created and deleted over the decades that we've simply lost track of. They're gaps in our geographic memory, holes in the map that we don't even know are there. Some researchers have made it their mission to document these lost zip codes, creating unofficial databases and maps that show what once was. It's like cartographic archaeology, digging through old phone books, vintage mail sorting guides, and archived databases to resurrect these vanished places. What they've found is startling. In some cases, zip codes existed for less than a year before being eliminated. In others, codes that served thousands of people for decades were removed with virtually no public notice. The postal system, it turns out, has been quietly redrawing our geographic reality, and most of us never noticed. There's also a darker side to this story. In some instances, zip codes have been deleted to facilitate gentrification or redevelopment. When an area gets a new zip code, it's not just a change in mail routing. It's a rebranding, a fresh start, a way to distance the new development from the old neighborhood's reputation and demographics. There are documented cases of developers lobbying for zip code changes to make properties more marketable. And while the Postal Service insists that such requests are evaluated purely on operational grounds, the fact remains that when poor neighborhoods get absorbed into more affluent zip codes, property values change, insurance rates shift, and the character of the place is fundamentally altered. In this way, deleting a zip code can be an act of erasure that goes beyond simple mail delivery. It's a way of saying that a place, and by extension the people who lived there, no longer matter enough to have their own identity. The international community faces similar issues. In the United Kingdom, postcodes have been deleted and reassigned, creating confusion and sometimes erasing the historic identities of neighborhoods. In Canada, postal codes in remote Indigenous communities have been consolidated, making it harder for residents to maintain their geographic distinctiveness. This is a global phenomenon, this quiet deletion of places from our official maps and databases. And as we move further into a world where digital identity matters as much as physical reality, the stakes keep getting higher. So what can be done? Some advocates are pushing for zip code preservation laws, regulations that would require public notice and community input before a zip code could be discontinued. Others argue for a digital archive, a public database that would preserve the history of every zip code ever created, ensuring that these places aren't completely forgotten. There's also a growing movement to recognize address poverty as a real social issue, something that deserves attention and resources to solve. After all, in a society where you need a valid address to get a job, open a bank account, or access government services, not having a recognized address is a serious barrier to economic participation. Some organizations have started programs to help people in ghost zip code areas establish valid addresses. They work with local governments and the Postal Service to create solutions, whether that means petitioning for zip code restoration or helping residents navigate the complex process of getting their addresses recognized in the systems that matter. The next time you write your zip code on a form or type it into a website, take a moment to appreciate that those 5 digits represent more than just a mail sorting convenience. They're a declaration that your place exists, that it matters, that it's real enough to be counted and cataloged and recognized by the systems that run our world. And remember that scattered across the map, invisible to most of us, are the ghost zip codes, the deleted places, the addresses that once were but are no more. They're reminders that our geographic reality is more fragile than we think, that places can be erased not just by time and nature, but by decisions made in distant offices, by database updates and cost-benefit analyses. These ghost zip codes are the modern equivalent of towns that fell off the map, except now the map is digital, the erasure is instant, and the ghosts haunt our databases instead of dusty main streets. They exist in the gaps between the official record and lived reality, places that are and aren't, addresses that work until they don't, communities that persist even after the system says they're gone. In the end, the story of ghost zip codes is really a story about what we choose to remember and what we allow to be forgotten. It's about the power of systems to define reality and the resilience of people who continue to exist in places that officially don't. It's a reminder that beneath the clean, organized surface of our maps and databases, there's a messier, more complex truth about how geography really works and who gets to decide what places matter. The next time someone asks for your zip code, you might just think about all the codes that nobody asks for anymore. The numbers that once meant home to someone, now deleted from the maps we trust to tell us what's real.